Hi, Rachel Mead here, President and founder of Enhanced Prep. I want to spend some time with you today talking about the two different forms that students can register for when taking the ACT. There's the digital exam and there's the pencil and paper version. I want to spend some time talking about some pros with regards to either test, strategies students can incorporate when they are using the digital, and what we here at Enhanced Prep are ready to do to help students make sure they're saying yes to the right form. So first of all, let's break down that digital test. Now, we know that the test is designed to be done in a group setting in a proctored situation. Unfortunately, we have many horror stories from our students where the proctor didn't respond appropriately or didn't set up the environment for optimal testing situations, including controlling the time correctly or not giving the students enough time or not giving them their breaks. That timing component is all taken care of within the digital platform. We also find that some students tend to be able to dial in a little bit more on the particular question that they're seeing rather than having some distraction happening from what else is happening on that page or where they are in the section. We also know that when students are madly scribbling, shuffling their papers, punching into things into their calculator aggressively, having to sharpen pencils, drop things on the floor, there's more opportunity for distraction when they're taking that pencil and paper version. We've heard some students just have the mini desk as well too once in a while, where maybe they don't have enough room to have their test booklet and their Scantron spread out. So again, that can resonate in that digital setting. There's the ability to quickly flag a question that they're skipping to make sure they come back to it rather than trying to put a mark that they're having to remember to erase on their bubble sheet or circling things in their test booklet. We have had some students where they circle the right thing in their test booklet, but then miss bubble on their Scantron. When they're testing digitally, there's the opportunity that they're marking it directly next to the question and there's no transference, which in some cases may help increase accuracy for students that have encountered that. Students have the ability to turn on a countdown timer. Again, it is completely optional in the digital environment, but some do find that it's able to help them keep better pacing as they're moving through things. And then, of course, there's the Desmos app that's available to students within the math section. Now, when we look at the paper, it is a lot easier for students to have active pencil within the reading and science, marking up where they are in the passage, marking things that they need to correlate to the questions. They can group and prioritize reading questions together or science questions together. In the reading, we know we want to do those line reference questions first, so it's easier to keep track of those. Or note that both of these questions happen to do with something like photo disassociation as an example, so we should do those next to each other. In science, we want to group questions according to the figure or the table or the experiment that they work on. When it comes to the pencil and paper, however they active pencil the passage stays right next to the questions as they're going through it. In that digital, the annotations only stick in a particular question. So there's a lot more scrolling between what they marked up in the text and moving through in those questions. And it's harder to keep track of exactly where they are in the passage or where the next passage starts. We also know in the reading and science, we want to prioritize particular types of passages over others. In the English, we also know we want to prioritize the 5-question passages over the others. Being able to do that on the pencil and paper exam is much easier. In the math portion, students don't have to redraw a triangle or a circle or whatever shape the question may be giving them in order to mark things up and do their work. They can keep track of their process of elimination faster with their pencil rather than the tool within the Desmos app. And then we have a lot of students that aren't necessarily comfortable in Desmos, but they really enjoy their own calculator that they've been using in math class or within their ACT prep. I also want to say that there's been some situations where the device check has happened. Again, when students are taking the digital exam, there's a device check that they have to go through a few days prior to the test in order to be able to have their device ready. Now, students can always borrow a device on site. It just won't necessarily be a version that they're as comfortable with. There have been some situations where the device check has been done. The student has confirmation on that, but it wasn't received or acknowledged by ACT and the seat was canceled as a result of that. So just one more thing to be aware of. Now, when it comes to which test a student should take or which version of the ACT a student should take, there's no right answer in terms of what fits students. Some students may benefit from the pencil and paper, some students may benefit from the digital. A lot of that depends upon where their strengths are, what their learning style looks like, things that they find a little bit easier versus the parts that tend to be a little bit more challenging. But one thing I want to make sure that our families are aware of is that section scores from either exam can be mixed and matched for super scoring. So, what we find is that many students find the English and the math easier in the digital format, but find the reading and the science sections easier on the pencil and paper format. Well, if students plan their schedule and plan ahead enough, they can go ahead and do a digital to get their English and math scores and a pencil and paper to get the reading and optional science scores and put those together in terms of a super score. Now, all of the students that are doing one-on-one prep here at Enhanced Prep, we work with them in terms of saying, let's try a pencil and paper, let's try a digital. We do those in a fairly close time frame so that we can look at accurate results, and we help them put together that plan. You need to be doing digital and digital only. You need to be doing pencil and pencil and paper only, or here's the right blend for you based upon what you, this particular customized student needs. So again, if you are an enhanced prep family or want to have this be your personalized plan, we are here to help with that. So I do want to spend a few minutes talking about how to effectively use scratch paper, especially within the digital component of the test when we're talking about reading or science. So I want to start by talking about the science and I want to start by talking about the reading. And we know in the reading, there's always 36 questions with a total of 9 questions per passage split across the 4 passages. So we want to start by numbering our paper and notice that we are doing this in the groups of 9 and we're leaving space in between to show our breaks for the passages. So 1 through 9 for passage 1, 10 through 18, 19 through 27, and 28 through 36. Now, this is something students need to get on their scratch paper right away because it is the same every single time that they're taking this. So as soon as they get their scratch paper, there's nothing that says they're not allowed to put things on their scratch paper before the test starts. Again, as long as all devices and notes are put away and all they're doing is numbering their paper, because it's not like they're getting additional information in here. Now make sure we have a little bit of the room on the left-hand side so that we can number our passages in the margin. And we want to go ahead and do these all in a row because we're going to be putting notes for our questions over there on the right-hand side. All right. So again, this is not all provided on one screen, but this is how we teach students to be using their paper. The first thing we want to do is we want to see what order to do the passages in. Now, again, this is talking generalities. All enhanced prep students are coached in terms of when they should be doing their lit passage, when they should be doing their dual passage, and how to order these. But generally speaking, most students should be doing their lit passage third and their dual passage fourth. So we know the first question for each passage is where we're going to find the blurb for that description. So again, what do I mean by that? Well, we know item 1 is going to give us the blurb for our first passage. Item 10 is going to give us the blurb for the second passage. Item 19 gives us our blurb for our third passage. And then item 28 gives us our blurb for our fourth passage. So in this case, we can see that passage 1 is our lit narrative, and it very specifically tells us that. And that's always going to be the case. So in my margin, I'm going to put a 3 up here because I should be doing that lit narrative passage third. We can also see that our passage at 19 is our dual passage. And while it's not saying dual, we can see, oh, let me use a different color here so we can keep things organized for you all. We can see it talks about passage A and passage B. And so this passage right here should be the one that we're doing fourth. Now, again, I want to say that this is pulled directly from the free practice test that ACT has available on their website. So I'm using that as reference and how to talk students practicing using their scratch paper in terms of how they're setting this up. Now, the other two passages are what we consider normal passages, non-lit, non-dual. And it really doesn't matter the order students do their normal passages in. They should always be first and second. It just comes back to the topics within it. So maybe the student wants to work on something botany or natural science based. Or down here we have the rise and fall of living fossils. Okay, so that could be more social science based down there. So either of these can be 1 and 2. Again, it doesn't matter with that, but we want to make sure we get that noted in the passage. So for me here, I would go ahead and I would do this passage 1 and this passage 2. So again, this is on my scratch paper in that margin next to where I have my questions numbered. All right, so now let's dig into that passage and let's say, okay, this is the first passage we're going to work on. And all we're doing here is quickly scrolling next, next, next as we're grabbing these questions. And we want to start making notes on our scratch paper of what we're doing. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say that this is our big picture question. And again, enhanced prep students know what that is. Main idea relates to the whole entire passage. And this is a question we're always going to come back and we're going to do last. Now, digital exams do not have line references on them, but they do talk about the underlined or the highlighted, and it does come through in highlight. And we know that we want students to do their line reference or designated questions first. It not only tells us what to look for, but where to look for it. So I'm going to put a great big star on question 11. I'm also going to put a great big star on question 13, and I'm going to do the same thing with question 14 as well. So these are the equivalents of questions that tell me not only what to look for, but where to find it. They should be questions that happen in my first set because I have one specific place I can quickly find those answers. So those are all done here. So now let's take a look at what we have with 12. And we've got 7th century tulip growers. So I'm going to put a quick note here, 17th century, and I'm going to say tea growers. So I've got that note on my scratch paper on what I want to come back and be on the lookout for as I'm moving through my passage. So my scratch paper is right here as I'm scrolling and reading, so I can be ready to make a note on where I'm going to find that. So now over here again, I'm going to continue on. So I'm looking at questions 15 through 18 here. And what do we have coming up in question 15? Broken tulips tended to be fewer and smaller. Okay, so I'm going to put a note on question 15 that says broken tulips. That's the lead words from the question that I am on the lookout for. We can see that our broken tulips are continuing in 16, and I'm also adding in Rembrandt. So I can use a little quote here to come back and bring in my information on those broken tulips and add in a capital R for Rembrandt. Again, this is something that needs to be really quick so that we can spend more time answering the questions. In question 17, I can see that we're talking about peach trees. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in right here as my lead word for that. All right, and then question 18 is going to get a star on it because again, it's asking us about one specific or highlighted space. All right, so now that's how I'm using my scratch paper between working through questions in the whole entire passage, and now I'm ready to go and start tackling the passage. But all of this should be done first for this one passage before I dig into it, because it's going to save me on that scrolling and it's going to help me keep track of which questions I'm doing first, which questions I'm doing last, and what I am on the lookout for. All right. The other thing I want to go over here with you on this is how we approach that dual. So again, remember that our dual is coming in as the fourth one that we're working on, and there's a few things that we want to take a look at. First of all, notice that we've got a passage A question here, a passage A question here, and a passage B. Now the questions are never going to jump. So we're going to have all of passage A together first, then we're going to have our passage B questions, and then we're going to have our comparison questions. So one of the first things I want to do is I want to draw a line on my scratch paper between questions 21 and 22. And again, I'm looking at that split right here because that's where I split from working on passage A questions to working on passage B questions. So I want that visual on my scratch paper to help me out with that. So then again, we can know here we're working on AAA. And so far, we also know that 22 and 23 are B. All right, we can come back through and we can still continue to grab those lead words. For example, I know 20 is going to get that star on it because, again, it's giving me that specific line reference that we're paying attention to. Maybe I'm going to put B-boys up here on 19. Looking at 21, I'm going to put my Tin Pan Alley. Again, short abbreviation rather than listing everything out whenever we have the opportunity to do that. 22, we've got Rapper's Delight. We've got a big song we're going to be on the lookout for. So let's get that down. 23 is another line reference one, or the equivalent of saying, hey, we've got something underlined within our paragraph. So that's going to go ahead and get a star. Taking a look at our next questions. We can see here with 24, we've got author and rap music. So we're on that first for rap music. So first, rap. I'm going to go ahead and list here and then look and see what happens here with these 3 questions. These are all my comparison questions. So I want to draw a line down here, and then these are my compare and contrast, right? So I want to note those out because those are the most time-consuming questions I'm going to hit in the whole entire passage. But then as we continue to have this list done, what do? Well, we're going to read passage A and we're going to answer those 3 questions for passage A. And then we're going to read passage B and answer those 3 questions for passage B. And then, assuming we still have some time, we can come back and work on those dense line comparisons, those dense passage A, passage B comparison questions that happen there towards the end. Hopefully this helps you. Again, remember that there is no one test is better overall. There are benefits to both the digital and the pencil and paper. We here at Enhanced Prep want to make sure that we can help you not only say yes to the right test, but the right version of the test, the right super scoring between the tests if that's the best plan for you. We hope to hear from you soon, and good luck on your ACT.